I sat in the austere family court, watching my father, Harold, systematically dismantle what little remained of our relationship with every word. "All she does is embarrass me, Your Honor," he declared, gesturing dismissively toward me while arguing that I shouldn't receive a single penny from my grandmother's estate. His voice dripped with contempt as he cataloged my supposed failures before the judge. I stayed silent, shocked and humiliated by this public attack from the man who was supposed to love me unconditionally. Then the judge leaned forward, her attention sharp and focused, fixing Harold with a penetrating stare. "You really don't know, do you?" Harold's attorney, Marcus, froze mid-sentence, scattering legal documents across the polished table. I watched as my father's confident expression faltered, his face draining of color. "My name is Sierra, and I never imagined I would be in a courtroom while my father methodically attacked my character." The mahogany-paneled room felt stifling as Harold continued, claiming I was unstable and irresponsible, unfit to inherit anything from my grandmother's estate. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 28 years, he had dismissed every achievement I accomplished. When I graduated valedictorian, he called it just book smarts. My magna cum laude business degree from Northwestern? A worthless piece of paper, he said. My nonprofit started at 23. Playing pretend businesswoman, he laughed. What Harold didn't know, and never bothered to discover, was that for the past 2 years, I had been the anonymous donor keeping his struggling law firm financially afloat. Through a trust fund I had established, I had quietly transferred over $300,000 to Caldwell and Associates, the family law firm Harold inherited and had been running into the ground. I noticed Marcus shifting uncomfortably in his leather chair, sweat beading on his forehead. He knew the implications of the judge's words, even if Harold remained obliviously confident. Marcus had processed the payments I made and had tried repeatedly to trace their source, only to hit the legal barriers I had put in place. Harold continued, unaware that his own attorney was panicking. "Your Honor, my daughter has never shown responsibility or commitment. She drifts from one failed venture to another, contributing nothing meaningful to society or our family." The judge, an elderly woman with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, remained attentive, making notes. Judge Patricia Hernandez was known for her preparation and rarely being surprised in court. The fact that she seemed to possess information Harold didn't know quickened my pulse with a mix of anxiety and hope. I had dreaded this day for months. When my grandmother, Eleanor, passed away 6 months ago at 87, I grieved not only her loss, but also the strained relationship in her final years. She had once been my champion, the one person who encouraged my ambitions when Harold dismissed them. But over the last 5 years of her life, our weekly calls became monthly and then stopped altogether. My letters went unanswered, visits politely declined. I assumed Harold's constant criticisms had influenced her opinion of me. Losing her support had been painful, but I channeled that hurt into building something meaningful, something that would have made her proud. Harold had positioned himself as the devoted son managing Eleanor's finances and care while portraying me as selfish and irresponsible. In his petition contesting the will, he cast himself as the logical heir to Eleanor's estate, which included her house, savings, and shares in various businesses. The courtroom felt heavy as Marcus finally spoke. "Your Honor, perhaps we should review the documentation you mentioned in chambers before proceeding." Judge Hernandez smiled, a blend of warmth and authority. "No, Counselor. It's important that everyone here understands the full scope of today's discussion. The evidence I've reviewed presents a very different picture of Miss Sierra than her father describes." Harold's confidence began to waver. "What evidence, Your Honor?" "I've known my daughter her entire life. I'm qualified to speak on her character." That was the first crack in his armor, and I felt a flicker of hope. The judge opened a thick file and spread documents across her desk, sunlight streaming through the courtroom windows. "Mr. Harold, you've claimed your daughter contributed nothing of value and is irresponsible. However, federal records present a different story." My heart raced. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Miss Sierra established and operates Veterans Haven, a nonprofit providing transitional housing for over 2,000 homeless veterans across 7 states. Harold's mouth opened and closed as he tried to process the information. Veterans Haven was my first major initiative, inspired by helping one homeless Marine named Tommy 3 years ago. It had grown into a network providing beds, job training, mental health support, and pathways to permanent housing. The judge continued. Additionally, Miss Sierra founded Bright Futures Literacy, distributing over 50,000 free books and establishing reading programs in 43 rural communities. And her third nonprofit, Golden Years Advocacy, has successfully lobbied for legislation protecting the elderly from financial exploitation, recovering over $2 million for senior fraud victims. Each revelation struck Harold like a blow. Marcus frantically took notes, trying to salvage the case. Harold finally spoke, his voice weak. I don't understand, Your Honor. Sierra never told me about this. If these organizations exist, why hide them from her father? Judge Hernandez removed her glasses, fixing him with a steel-like stare. Mr. Harold, did you ever ask your daughter about her work? Did you inquire about her goals, her projects, or her life beyond your assumptions? The silence that followed was heavy. I watched my father's face shift through confusion, anger, and perhaps the first hint of shame. The truth was, Harold had never asked about my work because he had already decided it wasn't worth knowing. Most of our recent conversations had revolved around his own problems, his struggles with the law firm, complaints about younger attorneys taking clients. Your Honor, Harold said, even if Sierra has been involved in these activities, it doesn't necessarily show the financial responsibility required to manage a substantial inheritance. Judge Hernandez smiled, a smile that was warm yet undeniably intimidating. I'm glad you mentioned financial responsibility, Mr. Harold, because that brings us to another interesting revelation. She produced documents bearing the official seal of the Internal Revenue Service. According to tax records, my 3 nonprofits had collectively received over $8 million in federal grants over the past 3 years, awarded based on impact, fiscal responsibility, and government oversight. The figure echoed through the courtroom. I had never tallied the total, but hearing it stated aloud was overwhelming. More importantly, I saw Harold struggle to reconcile this with his fixed image of me as an unsuccessful daughter. Marcus cleared his throat nervously. Your Honor, while Miss Sierra's charitable work is commendable, the issue before the court is whether Eleanor's will accurately reflects her intentions regarding her estate. Indeed, Counselor, Judge Hernandez replied, which leads to the question, why would Eleanor leave most of her estate to a granddaughter who, according to her son, had become distant and irresponsible in recent years? I felt a pang of pain recalling those final years with my grandmother. Her gradual withdrawal had been heartbreaking. Eleanor had been my greatest supporter, my confidant, and my inspiration. Her apparent rejection had fueled my determination to prove myself worthy of the love she had once shown me, even if she could no longer witness it. Harold straightened in his chair, sensing a chance to control the narrative. Exactly, Your Honor. My mother was hurt and confused by Sierra's neglect. She often expressed disappointment that Sierra had stopped visiting, calling, and showing care for the family. The judge's expression became serious. Mr. Harold, how exactly do you know what your mother felt about Sierra's supposed neglect? Her tone made Marcus and me sit straighter. Harold, oblivious to the danger, replied, I spoke with my mother regularly. I managed her affairs and ensured she wasn't alone. Unlike some, I understood family responsibilities. Judge Hernandez nodded. And during these conversations, your mother expressed disappointment about Sierra's lack of contact? Absolutely. She was heartbroken that Sierra had abandoned her. The judge made a note. Interesting, Mr. Harold, because this contradicts other evidence suggesting your mother's isolation from Sierra might not have been voluntary. The room seemed to chill as the implications sank in. Harold's confident demeanor began to crack. Judge Hernandez reached into her file and produced letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. I recognized my handwriting and my grandmother's careful script. Miss Sierra, the judge asked gently, did you write letters to your grandmother over the past 5 years? Yes, Your Honor, I whispered. Every month, sometimes more. She stopped responding about 3 years ago, and I assumed she had grown tired of hearing from me. Harold's face went pale. Marcus stared at the letters in horror as their significance became clear. The judge untied the ribbon and spread them across her desk. These letters were found in your father's home office, Miss Sierra. None were ever delivered to your grandmother. Similarly, letters from her to you were never mailed. The revelation hit hard. For 3 years, I had believed my grandmother had cut me out. I had written letter after letter, sharing my work, hopes, and love, only to receive silence. That pain had driven me to work harder, prove myself, and achieve more, believing her rejection was real. Your Honor, I managed through tears. I don't understand. Why would my father intercept our correspondence? Harold stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I was protecting my mother from Sierra's selfish manipulation. She constantly asked for money, taking advantage of an elderly woman's generosity. Judge Hernandez's voice cut through him. Mr. Harold, I've read these letters. Not one contains a request for money. In fact, some include checks Sierra sent for birthdays and Christmas, checks you apparently cashed without Eleanor's knowledge. The room spun as the betrayal sank in. Harold hadn't just kept us apart. He had stolen the modest gifts I sent to show my care. Marcus whispered urgently to Harold, who nodded reluctantly, but the damage was done. Eleanor was vulnerable. She had dementia. She couldn't make rational decisions, Harold insisted. According to medical records, Judge Hernandez replied, your mother was never diagnosed with dementia. She remained mentally sharp until her death. However, records show you, as her healthcare proxy, convinced her doctors she was confused and paranoid. Furthermore, Eleanor repeatedly asked about letters and calls from her granddaughter, and you told her Sierra was too busy to maintain contact. I buried my face in my hands as the full scope of my father's deception became clear. He had manipulated both my grandmother and me for his own purposes. Harold slumped back, muttering, I was protecting family interests. Sierra was irresponsible, unreliable. Mother needed stability, not empty promises. Mr. Harold, Judge Hernandez said firmly, while you told your mother that Sierra was too busy, she was actually building organizations that positively impacted thousands. While you convinced Eleanor that Sierra didn't care, Sierra was sending loving letters and financial support, which you intercepted and stole. I found my voice despite the turmoil. Your Honor, if my grandmother had known the truth about my work and the letters I wrote, she would have wanted to see me before she died. Judge Hernandez's expression softened, acknowledging the weight of the revelation. Miss Sierra, I have additional evidence indicating your grandmother not only wanted to see you, but also took deliberate steps to secure your future despite the barriers your father created. Judge Hernandez reached for a file marked with the seal of a private investigator. 6 months before her death, your grandmother hired a private investigator to locate you and learn about your circumstances. She had grown suspicious of your father's explanations for your absence and wanted the truth. Harold made a choking sound, but Marcus pressed a firm hand on his arm to keep him quiet. The investigator's report detailed my nonprofit work, federal recognition, and the positive impact I had made across multiple states. Eleanor had not only been proud of my accomplishments, but she had also been furious that deception had kept us apart. Judge Hernandez pulled out a handwritten document. This is a letter your grandmother wrote but never sent, found among her personal effects. Miss Sierra, would you like me to read it aloud? I nodded, tears streaming down my face. My dearest Sierra, the judge read gently, I have learned why you disappeared from my life, and my heart is broken, not by your absence, but by my son's cruelty in keeping us apart. I am proud of the woman you have become and amazed by the lives you have touched. I should have trusted my instincts about Harold's explanations years ago. I pray that someday you will forgive an old woman for not seeing through his lies sooner. I have taken steps to ensure you receive what you deserve, not just from my estate, but from life itself. All my love, Eleanor. The courtroom fell silent. I could hear my own breathing as I processed that my grandmother had known the truth, had loved and been proud of me until the end. Harold sat motionless, staring at his hands. Marcus looked like he wished he could be anywhere else. I felt a mixture of grief, relief, and anger that would take years to fully process. Judge Hernandez continued. She placed the letter back in its file and pulled out another legal document bearing multiple seals. Mr. Harold, your argument for inheriting your mother's estate partly relies on your role as the responsible son who managed her affairs and maintained the family law firm. Is that correct? Harold nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Mother trusted me to maintain the firm's reputation and profitability. I've dedicated my career to it and consider myself the rightful owner. Judge Hernandez smiled, a look I now recognized as ominous. Interesting, Mr. Harold. Corporate filings from 5 years ago show that your mother transferred her partnership shares in Caldwell and Associates to your daughter, Sierra, making her the majority owner. The courtroom went silent. Harold's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, denial, and finally dawning horror. That's impossible, he whispered. Sierra doesn't know anything about running a law firm. She's never worked there. Actually, Judge Hernandez said, consulting the documents, the transfer was fully legal and properly executed. Your mother retained a small percentage, but Sierra became the controlling shareholder with 65% of the company. I felt as though the floor had shifted beneath me. I had no idea I owned part of Harold's firm. Marcus froze, pen hovering over his pad, likely calculating the implications of accepting payments from Harold, who may not have had authority. Judge Hernandez continued, producing bank statements. The anonymous financial support that has kept Caldwell and Associates solvent for the past 2 years came from Sierra herself, channeled through her trust fund. She has unknowingly been investing in her own company. For 2 years, I had watched Harold struggle with his failing law practice, feeling guilty about his financial stress despite his criticism of my choices. I had set up trust fund payments to help him without harming his pride, never imagining I was supporting a business I owned. Harold stood abruptly, chair toppling backward. This is insane. Sierra can't own my firm. I built this practice. I've worked here for 20 years. Mr. Harold, Judge Hernandez said calmly, you have been the managing partner of a firm majority owned by your daughter. The woman you've described as irresponsible and unfit to inherit has been your business partner and primary financial supporter for years. The irony was overwhelming. Harold had argued all morning that I was incompetent to manage an inheritance, unaware I had been supporting his livelihood. Marcus finally spoke. Your Honor, if Sierra is the majority owner of Caldwell and Associates, representing Mr. Harold presents a serious conflict of interest. Indeed, Judge Hernandez agreed. This raises questions about who has authority to make decisions regarding the firm's operations and expenditures. Harold's face shifted from shock to anger. Sierra may have papers with her name, but she doesn't know law or business. Those documents don't mean anything. Actually, Mr. Harold, they mean quite a lot, the judge said. Sierra's business degree, her success managing nonprofits, and her ability to secure and manage millions in federal funding suggest she may be more qualified to run a law firm than you assumed. I spoke, my voice shaky. Your Honor, I had no knowledge of owning any part of the firm. Why would my grandmother transfer ownership without telling me? Judge Hernandez consulted additional documents. Your grandmother became concerned about your father's management of the firm years ago. She discovered significant irregularities in client funds and expenses. Rather than confront him directly, she transferred control to someone she trusted to maintain ethical standards. Harold sank back, ashen. I asked, what kind of irregularities? Unauthorized loans from client trust accounts, inflated expense reports, billing for services never provided. Judge Hernandez explained she feared serious ethical violations that could result in disbarment or criminal charges. Harold made a strangled noise. Those were temporary business loans. I intended to repay them. The firm was struggling. I had to make hard decisions. Mr. Harold, Judge Hernandez said firmly, borrowing from client funds is never acceptable, temporary or not. It is embezzlement, regardless of intent. The word hit the courtroom like lightning. I realized my support hadn't just helped Harold personally. It had prevented him from stealing from clients. Marcus began frantically packing his briefcase. Your Honor, I must withdraw my representation of Mr. Harold immediately. Granted, Judge Hernandez said. You may seek new counsel, but be advised the State Bar Association will receive copies of this file. Harold looked around the courtroom as if searching for an escape. The man, who had entered confident in his authority, now faced potential criminal charges and professional ruin. But Judge Hernandez wasn't finished. The pile of documents on her desk suggested more revelations were coming, and I braced myself. The shift from Harold's confident attacks on my character to this desperate situation had been so rapid that it was hard to process. Everything I thought I knew about my family, my relationship with my grandmother, and even my own life was being rewritten, and I sensed the biggest revelations were still ahead. Judge Hernandez glanced at the clock and then looked at me with an expression that was both serious and quietly proud. "Miss Sierra, there is one more matter to discuss today, and it concerns your immediate future rather than your past." She reached for a folder bearing the official seal of the United States government. My pulse quickened. What federal matter could relate to our inheritance dispute? "2 weeks ago," she continued, "I received an inquiry from the Federal Bureau of Investigation regarding your background and character. This was part of a comprehensive security clearance investigation." My mouth went dry. I had no idea why the FBI would be investigating me, though I suspected it was connected to the federal grants my nonprofits had received. "Miss Sierra, you have been selected by the President of the United States for appointment as the inaugural director of the Rural Development and Community Empowerment Agency," Judge Hernandez announced. "This is a newly created federal department addressing economic inequality in America's small towns and rural communities." The words hit me like a physical force. Presidential appointment. Federal directorship. Harold made a choking sound. "That's impossible," he stammered. "Sierra couldn't handle a federal appointment. She doesn't have the experience or qualifications." Judge Hernandez fixed him with a withering stare. "Mr. Harold, your daughter's work with Veterans Haven alone demonstrates her ability to manage complex operations across multiple states while complying with federal regulations. Her success in securing and administering $8 million in federal grants shows the fiscal responsibility and program management skills required for federal leadership." I spoke, my voice barely a whisper. "Your Honor, I had no idea I was being considered for any federal position. The selection process was confidential until recently. The federal government became aware of your reputation through your nonprofit work and collaboration with various agencies," Judge Hernandez explained. "The recommendation came from the director of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, who was impressed by Veterans Haven's innovative approach to addressing homelessness." She pulled out official White House letterhead. "The FBI background investigation is standard for all presidential appointees and requires Senate confirmation. During that investigation, they discovered financial irregularities in your father's law practice and his interference with family communications." Harold slumped in his chair as the implications sank in. His actions were now part of a federal investigation affecting someone vetted for high-level government service. The FBI report noted that Harold's behavior could be considered obstruction of a federal appointment process, given its potential emotional impact on my ability to serve. My head was spinning. A presidential appointment, Senate confirmation, federal leadership, all possibilities I had never imagined. Judge Hernandez continued, reading from the White House letter. "The proposed agency will have an annual budget of $2 billion and coordinate rural development across multiple federal departments. You would oversee programs addressing infrastructure, education, healthcare access, and economic development in underserved communities." $2 billion. Harold's firm had struggled to manage a few $100,000 annually, and now the federal government suggested I could oversee a budget 4,000 times larger. "Your Honor," I asked, struggling to process it, "when would this appointment take effect?" "The Senate confirmation process usually takes several months, but due to the urgency of rural development needs, the hearing has been fast-tracked for next month," Judge Hernandez explained. "However, there is concern that family complications could distract from your ability to serve effectively." She looked meaningfully at Harold. "The FBI investigation revealed that your financial misconduct and manipulation of family relationships could create ongoing stress and public scrutiny for someone in federal service. The White House needs confidence these issues can be resolved cleanly." Harold realized his behavior could jeopardize a presidential appointment. "Your Honor, my daughter's personal family matters wouldn't affect her ability to serve," he said. Actually, Mr. Harold, they could. Judge Hernandez replied, federal appointees face intense public scrutiny. Ongoing family disputes, particularly involving financial misconduct, could become political or media issues. She produced another document. The FBI also determined your interference with Sierra's relationship with her grandmother may have violated federal laws. Marcus, who had been quietly trying to disappear into the courtroom, sat up straight. Harold went pale. Intercepting mail intended for another person is a federal crime. Cashing checks made out to someone else constitutes mail fraud. Using your position as healthcare proxy to provide false medical information is healthcare fraud. These charges could result in significant prison time. The room fell silent, except for Harold's labored breathing. The man who had confidently attacked my character was now facing potential federal criminal charges. Your Honor, I said quietly, what does this mean for my grandmother's estate and the federal appointment? Judge Hernandez's expression softened. Miss Sierra, your grandmother's will is clear. She left you the majority of her estate because she discovered the truth about your accomplishments and your father's interference. As for the federal appointment, the decision is yours. You have 1 week to accept the nomination. The Senate hearing is scheduled pending your acceptance. I held the White House letter trembling. My grandmother had orchestrated this from beyond the grave. Her investigation had revealed Harold's deceptions and likely brought my work to federal attention. Harold sat stunned, probably calculating whether he could afford a criminal defense attorney. The tables had turned completely. But Harold suddenly straightened in his chair, a familiar calculating expression on his face. Despite everything, the federal crimes, the ethical violations, he wasn't ready to concede. I recognized that look from childhood. Harold was about to make one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. Your Honor, he said, his voice gaining strength. While I acknowledge that Sierra has clearly achieved more than I realized, the fundamental question remains. Is she prepared for the enormous responsibilities you've described? Harold said. Judge Hernandez raised an eyebrow but let him continue. Sierra's success running small nonprofits, while commendable, hardly qualifies her for a federal directorship managing billions of dollars. If she deserves this appointment, it's because of the foundation I provided through my parenting. Everything she's accomplished stems from the values and work ethic I instilled. I felt a surge of anger. Even facing potential federal charges, Harold was attempting to claim credit for achievements he had long dismissed and undermined. Harold pressed on, convinced he had found a winning argument. Your Honor, if Sierra accepts this federal appointment, I should be recognized for contributing to her preparation. Perhaps the estate distribution should reflect my role in shaping her character and abilities. Judge Hernandez remained silent, her expression unreadable. Harold, sensing approval, continued, furthermore, if Sierra is qualified for federal service, surely she would want her father to be proud. We could resolve family differences and present a united front for her confirmation hearings. The Senate will want to see strong family support. The manipulation was clear. In minutes, Harold had tried to recast himself from obstacle to essential contributor. Judge Hernandez finally spoke, her tone deceptively mild. Mr. Harold, you are suggesting Sierra's achievements reflect your influence? Exactly, Your Honor. Despite our misunderstandings, I've always been committed to her success. Any parent would be proud to see such recognition. I see. And you believe Sierra's financial skill and ethical judgment come from your guidance? Harold nodded eagerly, unaware of the trap being set. Interesting, Mr. Harold, Judge Hernandez said, opening a file containing bank statements and financial records. These records show that when Sierra was 18 and starting college, you were listed as a cosigner on her student loans. However, you used her credit information to secure additional loans without her knowledge or consent. My stomach sank. The mysterious debts, the credit problems, and the difficulty securing business funding, it had all been Harold. Furthermore, the judge continued, you used Sierra's identity and social security number to obtain 3 business loans totaling $150,000. These loans went into default, damaging her credit for 7 years. Harold's face turned pale. Your Honor, those were family business investments. Sierra benefited from the firm's success. Mr. Harold, Judge Hernandez said firmly. Identity theft is a federal crime, regardless of family ties. Damaging your daughter's credit while she worked to establish herself professionally is particularly serious. She pulled more documents. The FBI also found that over the years, you contacted several of Sierra's potential business partners and investors, telling them she was financially unreliable and advising against doing business with her. I felt a physical shock, promising opportunities that had inexplicably fallen through. All of it was Harold sabotaging me. Your Honor, I said, my voice trembling, are you saying my father actively sabotaged my business efforts? Yes, Judge Hernandez replied. Witness statements confirm Harold contacted at least 6 major donors and 3 corporate partners, claiming you were unstable and financially irresponsible. I remembered every rejection, every door that slammed shut when success seemed near. I had doubted myself, wondering if Harold had been right about my abilities. All along, he had actively worked to ensure my failure. Harold stood abruptly. This has been taken out of context. I was trying to protect Sierra from making poor business decisions. Mr. Harold, Judge Hernandez said, her tone icy, you committed identity theft, damaged your daughter's credit, stole from client accounts, intercepted personal mail, committed fraud, and sabotaged her business relationships. And now you want credit for her success? The weight of his actions was undeniable. I had achieved everything despite his deliberate sabotage. The judge continued, what is remarkable is that Sierra built 3 successful organizations and earned federal recognition while her father systematically undermined her. Harold slumped, realizing his manipulation had backfired. By claiming credit for my success, he highlighted his sabotage. Marcus finally spoke. Your Honor, I must withdraw immediately. I cannot represent someone facing potential federal charges for identity theft and mail fraud. Granted, Judge Hernandez said. Mr. Harold, you must find new counsel. Be aware the state bar and federal prosecutors will receive a full copy of this file. Harold sat in stunned silence. The man who spent the day attacking me now faced federal criminal charges and the destruction of his professional reputation. Judge Hernandez gathered the documents and looked at me with respect and admiration. The afternoon sun cast golden light through the courtroom, symbolic of the clarity emerging from the day. Miss Sierra, she said, based on all the evidence, this court validates your grandmother's will in full. You are awarded the entire inheritance, including her house, savings, $1.2 million in investments, and her shares in various businesses. The number hit me like a thunderclap. 1.2 million plus property and investments, far more than I had imagined. Additionally, Judge Hernandez continued, you are now the legal majority owner of Caldwell and Associates, with full authority over operations, personnel, and financial management. Harold gasped, but the judge wasn't finished. Mr. Harold, your interference with Sierra's inheritance, interception of mail, identity theft, and other fraudulent acts constitute grounds for restitution. You are ordered to repay Sierra for all damages caused, including intercepted gifts, credit repair costs, and lost business opportunities totaling $300,000. The amount was staggering, but more significant was the recognition that Harold's sabotage had been real and systematic. The state bar will receive a full report of your ethical violations, and federal prosecutors will review evidence of mail fraud, identity theft, and other potential federal crimes. Harold seemed to shrink into his chair, finally grasping the full extent of his situation. The man who had entered the courtroom confident in his superiority now faced professional ruin, financial loss, and potential prison time. Judge Hernandez turned to me. Miss Sierra, regarding the federal appointment, the decision is entirely yours. However, I should note that your handling of this family crisis with dignity and restraint has impressed federal observers. Your character has been tested under extreme circumstances, and you've demonstrated the integrity the government seeks in its leaders. I took a deep breath, finally finding my voice. Your Honor, I accept the presidential nomination. I believe I can serve the American people effectively while honoring my grandmother's memory and the values she instilled in me. Excellent, Judge Hernandez said. The Senate confirmation hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. You will be contacted by White House personnel to begin the preparation process. I looked at Harold, sitting defeated and silent. Despite everything he had done, despite years of sabotage and betrayal, I felt more sadness than anger. The father I had hoped would be proud of me had instead been my greatest obstacle. Your Honor, I said quietly, regarding Caldwell and Associates and my father's future, I would like to make a proposal. Judge Hernandez nodded for me to continue. Harold can continue working at the firm as a junior associate under strict supervision and ethical oversight. He will complete continuing legal education on professional responsibility and undergo regular audits. His salary will allow him to live modestly while paying restitution. Harold looked up, surprised and perhaps hopeful. I continued, this offer is contingent on Harold completing a comprehensive ethics program, making full financial restitution, and accepting responsibility for his actions without excuse. He must also write formal apologies to every client and business contact he misled about my character. Judge Hernandez smiled approvingly. That seems both just and merciful, Miss Sierra. I faced Harold directly. Harold, I'm offering you a chance to rebuild your life and earn respect through honest work and accountability. This is the only opportunity you'll have. If you violate these terms, you will be terminated, and I will pursue all criminal charges fully. Harold's voice was barely a whisper. Sierra, I don't understand why you would help me after everything I've done. Because, I said, feeling the weight of my grandmother's wisdom, someone once taught me that true strength comes not from revenge, but from breaking cycles of harm and creating something better. Grandmother Eleanor believed in redemption through action. I'm giving you a chance to prove you can learn from your mistakes and become the person she hoped you could be. Harold nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. I accept your terms, Sierra, and I'm truly sorry for everything. Judge Hernandez made her final notes. This court is adjourned. Miss Sierra, congratulations on your inheritance and your federal appointment. Mr. Harold, you have 30 days to secure new legal representation for the criminal matters ahead. As we gathered our belongings, I felt a complex mix of emotions: grief for lost years with my grandmother, anger at Harold's betrayals, but also hope and pride for what I had accomplished despite every obstacle. Walking out of the courthouse, I carried not only a substantial inheritance and a federal appointment, but also the knowledge that I had succeeded on my own merits. My grandmother had been proud of me all along, and I had the strength to build something meaningful from even the most painful circumstances. 6 months later, I stood in the Rose Garden of the White House as the president announced my confirmation as director of the Rural Development and Community Empowerment Agency. Harold attended, wearing the modest suit of a junior associate rather than the expensive attire of a firm partner, applauding with genuine pride for perhaps the first time. That evening, I visited my grandmother's grave, placing fresh flowers beside her headstone. Thank you for believing in me, I whispered, and for teaching me that those who try to diminish us often reveal more about their own limitations than ours. The foundation I established in Eleanor's name has since recovered over $15 million in stolen assets for elderly victims of financial abuse. Harold has become one of our most dedicated volunteers, using his legal expertise to help other families avoid the mistakes he made. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating those who hurt us, but helping them find a path to become better people. That lesson, like so many others, came from a grandmother who loved me enough to see my potential, even when I couldn't see it myself. What about you? Have you ever realized that someone's opinion of you says more about them than it does about you? Have you found strength in unexpected places when facing family betrayal or professional challenges? Share your story in the comments below. Remember, your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. If this story resonated, like this video, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and justice, and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their strength. Thank you for joining me today. Sometimes our greatest setbacks become the foundation for our most meaningful comebacks.